Today is a great day because we have our first announcement of a franchise team running an academy roster in the 2021 season. Let's get into it. Alright, so here is the tweet then from Los Angeles Guerrillas. Last night they tweeted, "It's time for hashtag the return to glory. Our 2021 roster is ready to rumble." And then the announcement of their mainline roster, which is Silly, Apathy, Assault, and Vivid. And then alongside that as well, they drop a surprise announcement. Their academy team is MentaL, Chino, Exceed, and Nero. Now, I didn't expect an academy team. I expected this announcement to be something like, here is our roster: Silly, Apathy, Assault, Vivid, MentaL. Really interesting stuff, actually, that they do have an academy team, because I think everybody is well aware of the fact that this season is essentially a cost-cutting one for a number of franchise teams. You know, the substitute spots. We're going to 4 versus 4 for one of those reasons, according to many players, at least. And beyond that as well, teams like the Toronto Ultra are basically purging their substitute spots, which is super interesting. They're going down to a team of 5 instead of a team of 10, and that is just simply because it's more cost effective to do that, especially with everything that's going on in the world with COVID. You want to save as much money as possible to make profits as a business. That being said, that's why it's so interesting to see the Los Angeles Guerrillas having an academy team this season. It's a nice surprise too, because I do think that support for challenges is very, very important to the survival of Call of Duty esports. I think it's integral, right? You have to have a solid foundation. You cannot just have the franchise league, and that's why challenges is so important. And I love the fact that the LAG are out here supporting it with this team. So here is the team then. As I said, you got MentaL, Chino, Exceed, and Nero. To talk about the team, Chino and Exceed, they've played together before. Anyone who knows, Sicario Gaming, if you remember them from 2019 Champs, where they got top 12, that Tommy roster, Chino and Exceed, they actually played together there. So they have chemistry, but individually as well, they have made waves in the past few years. Of course, Chino is basically a veteran at this point. He's a pro going all the way back to Black Ops 2 to Ghosts. So he is pretty experienced in the game. But in terms of the Modern Warfare season, the 2020 season, you'll remember that Chino basically warmed the bench for Optic Gaming Los Angeles. He came out a few times, I think, for 3 home series events. But beyond that, he didn't really do much in the Modern Warfare season. And the same can really be said for a player such as Exceed, who kind of spent more of his time in challenges. He was on the Minnesota Rockers bench. He was getting that salary, and he did actually play at Champs for them. However, for basically the majority of the season, he was with Rebel Esports, that roster in North American Challenges. And beyond Chino and Exceed on this roster, you've got the additions of MentaL and Nero. So we'll talk about Nero first, because I think Nero is probably the more interesting one here to talk about. So Nero, to me, I didn't expect this at all, simply because I've never heard of Nero before. I'll be honest. I had no idea who Nero was going into this, but I have done a little bit of research, and it turns out that he is a Search and Destroy streamer. He has a lot of winnings in Search and Destroy. He seems to be very prevalent at the mode, and I think that is a good addition to have in any academy team. If you have somebody who is good at Search and Destroy, can give you those strats and be like, hey, you go this, don't do that. It can be very valuable to a team like this. So he is going to be an exciting addition to the roster. He's recently turned 18 as well in May. So for that reason as well, he probably wasn't able to play challenges up until very recently, and of course back in May, you're not going to jump in at that point as a newly turned 18-year-old. The pro points are so entrenched at that you are just a hindrance to your roster. So it is nice to see Nero here on this team, but perhaps the biggest thing here to talk about is MentaL. Now, as I said, I simply expected MentaL to be a sub, to be loaned out to a Challengers roster. He wasn't. He's here on this academy team, headlining it alongside Chino, Exceed, and Nero. And for those of you who don't know who MentaL is, super successful Gears of War player, probably the most famous one that there is, making his way over to COD. Now, it was a few weeks ago where MentaL made a few waves, and I will talk about it because I think I didn't get the chance to do it back then. I was still looking to bring some graphics for all this YouTube malarkey together. But MentaL made some waves, I think, when the CDL Intel report came out that he was joining the LA Guerrillas, and there were a number of players. Most of those tweets have been deleted now, but there are a number of players who tweeted out their frustrations, right? You've got a player like Sib and Fire from America, who I believe those tweets have gone now, but they were pretty fired up about it. And of course, from the amateur point of view, it's that a player is coming over and taking what is not just a substitute spot, but a very valuable substitute spot. So I'm going to show you a tweet now very quickly from Defrag. So Defrag, of course, is a European player. I talked about him in one of the videos a couple of days ago with his new roster. And this is a tweet from the 20th of September when the MentaL news sort of leaked. He said, last year we had content creators getting sub spots because they assumed their team wouldn't make changes. This year we have a player from a completely different game being signed, doing anything but playing in the path to pro seems better at netting a contract. Now, you know, I do want to touch upon this whole thing with MentaL and everything, because I kind of agree in a way. I agree and disagree. So I want to first of all say that I completely understand MentaL getting a spot. I do. I think that, you know, it's so valuable to an organization from a content creation perspective, and just sort of like investing, generally speaking, in getting a player like that could potentially be good. To have him signed on your roster and say, look, we've just assigned the most valuable Gears of War player there is. We've got him to come to play Call of Duty, and he's on our team. And for a roster like the Los Angeles Guerrillas, that is super important, because I personally think the LAG were probably the most low-key team there was. In the first year, they were pretty rubbish doing everything from marketing to winning. They were dreadful. They were probably the worst team in the league from that perspective. So to see them doing this is a really good move for their organization. A really good move. It makes sense. However, I kind of understand it from a player perspective as well, right? I mean, just think about it. If you're a Challengers player, such as Defrag, such as any Challengers player, right, who's been grinding their way through Challengers, and you hear this news that a sub spot that is super valuable in this context, because we're in 4 versus 4, there's less spots than there were last year, has been given away to a player that's not played COD on the same level that these guys have for years to try to get to that spot. It is super frustrating. I completely understand that as a caster as well, because it happens in casting. You can grind a game for years and somebody can come over from a different esport and just get right in to one of the top spots. It happens. And it's one of the things that you kind of just have to live with as a caster. And unfortunately, it's one of the things you have to live with as a player too. That being said, you know, there are a few caveats with this season that I think LAG could have used. You know, they could well have said, hey, we'll talk to you, go off, prove yourself in Challengers, and we'll bring you on with the shorter contracts, which they are available this season. We have 14-day contracts on the cards for this upcoming season. You can also sign players in the mid-season, and we already know that they are open to having more than one substitute on the roster, because they do have a second player this year. So this is just me basically saying I completely kind of understand where Challengers players are coming from with this whole MentaL issue, but he is on the roster, and I'm excited to see what he can do. You know, we've had Halo players coming over from Halo in the past, and they've done extremely well. Hey, a lot of the top players in the league are ex-Halo players. So you've got, you know, Shotzi, who is probably the most prolific at this point in time, but you forget that players like Enable, Formal, Crimsix, all of them Halo players in the past, and they have all transitioned to COD extremely successfully. And hey, I could even be missing out players right now. I'm pretty sure people in the comments are going to be saying it. But I did want to talk about the MentaL issue at least a little bit, because I do think that he is a player that I think is going to be super successful this season. But I completely understand where Challengers players are coming from, because you do have players like those on Team War, like those on Singularity, like those on Train Hard, like those on Connect 5, who just, they should be getting a chance in the league, and they aren't. And that, it sucks. It does suck. But you kind of just have to move away from being entitled about it and just say, hey, it doesn't matter. We will continue to grind and continue to go. But that's the MentaL situation. That is how it is right now in the league. And that is the team as well. So we have your MentaL, your Chino, your Exceed, and your Nero. Now, the only question to ask really is, how are these guys going to perform? How are MentaL, Chino, Exceed, and Nero going to do in North American Challenges? I presume that is the region they're playing in, unless they come and pull a sneaky on us and they put them in APAC or Europe. Honestly, I think this roster is going to be super talented. I think they're going to do very, very well. They could easily be the top roster in North America, of course, barring what some of the teams are currently forming. I mean, there are a number of players out there that we simply don't know where they're landing, right? I mean, Parasite, probably the most prolific player in North American Challenges. We don't even know where he is, and not only that as well, but again, there are players losing their sub spots from the first year, players losing their starting spots from the first year, who will end up in challenges. So even though I think this is going to be easily a top 3 roster, is it going to be the top dog? We don't know yet. There are still a number of rosters to form. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching the LAG announcement video. If you like what you saw today, please subscribe to my channel for all things Call of Duty Challenges content. And of course, make sure you like this video to let me know just how much you enjoyed it. And of course, feel free to use the comment section to send me all kinds of abuse about how wrong I am about all of this, as always. But again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.